eavesdropping on you, but you have concerns about the trustworthiness of the telecom infrastructure in a foreign country, and say you have an important competitor there, they could be paying somebody off in the telco to be allowing access to your phone calls. That's the situation we're going over here.
But do also take note of that, even in a quote progressive pro-government like Holland, you have military intelligence officers clearly stating that the economy is a national interest and needs to be secured. So this basically justifies things like, eavesdropping on, what was it, Airbus versus Boeing, where Echelon was used, and I guess France or Germany also tried to spy in on the Americans, and some large bit went to Boeing instead of Airbus, just because and this is like governments using their infrastructure to help their own big corporations, because money is national interest. You need to, if your government has no money, you'll lose your security. So it's not just the paranoid people that are trying to get you. It's just justified by money. Okay, so by now I'm looking at the cryptophone people. I see the cryptophone people heavily looking at the slide. So the cryptophone, as far as I know, only does cryptophone to cryptophone call. Now, there's software as well, so you can use your PC. But it doesn't have the flexibility of calling into a PBX, where from the PBX you can do other calls. So this is one feature we like. We can go to a PBX and then we can make SIP calls, or we can go to a POTS line and make a normal call. So you can protect yourself from the local area that you are and make a secure call to a trusted area, and then go untrusted from there. But that's okay because you trust that area. Okay, this is where I take off.
So we're using Asterisk as our PBX, wrapped up in the lovely Trixbox distribution, which Trixbox is quite the kitchen sink of Asterisk. It even includes, as you can see from the slide, Sugar CRM, because you got to have CRM on your PBX on the same machine. Anyway, the advantage of Trixbox is that it takes about 20 minutes to set up after you've clicked enter at the install. We're now going to go into Firefox. And so, yeah, Trixbox.org is where you can get it. From the main screen, you log in as your administrative user, and then you get the admin interface, which is FreePBX, which is another open source piece of software that sits on top of Asterisk. The Asterisk configuration files can be a bit tricky, so it's nice to have a convenient web GUI if you want to just do like simple, a couple of extensions and a POTS line. It's really, really convenient to be able to set it up in 20 minutes. To get Trixbox working initially, you have to install a few modules. The new 2.0 version comes with absolutely nothing installed, even like the main API and application, like the core application. So to get anything done, you have to have the core, and I can never remember which one else. I'm pretty sure you just need core to have like a couple of extensions, but you might as well add stuff like conferences. None of these are things that are gonna, if you have a PBX that's behind a VPN, none of this is stuff that's gonna put you at risk in any way because it's behind a VPN. If you were wanting to put this machine on the internet to be able to receive calls to SIP user at myasterisk.org, you would want to be very careful about what you're installing on your Asterisk server, and you definitely wouldn't want to use Trixbox. There's too many random web apps installed on it to want to use it on the public internet. But for the model that we were looking at, with having it behind a VPN, it's not as big of a deal, and it is really convenient. So then, yeah, just a simple process of setting up an extension. You go over to the extension menu, add extension gets you this form, but without stuff filled in, and then you go through. All you need to include is the secret, and you have to change the type to friend for an end user for a SIP client. You can also do, there's a couple of different, depending on what you're using for your endpoint, you might also want to use a different kind of extension, like, and the internet's not working. Yeah, there's a bunch of different extension types that you can add to your Trixbox, whether it's one of the other voice over IP protocols. With a bit of hacking, you can even get H323 working if you really want to. But SIP, EEX, and PSTN are the big three. So EEX is the inter-asterisk exchange. It's the homegrown protocol that was originally designed to trunk asterisks together, but you can also use it to endpoints. It's a little easier to get through a firewall, whereas SIP, firewall or NAT, whereas SIP has all these like complicated problems around. Basically, the stuff that you had to deal with FTP years ago, you have to deal with all that again with SIP, because it sets up a UDP stream on a high random port. So that has its own difficulties. So yeah, we basically, for what we wanted to do here, we just had an asterisk set up with a couple of extensions. It's pretty simple. So yeah, and then we'll get into so many phones and so few of them worked. So we started out with this whole giant collection of potential phones that, you know, had the processing power, the IP stack, all the stuff that we needed to be able to do what we wanted to do, which is in and of itself a fairly simple proposition: voice over IP over VPN over a cell phone connection of one type or another. So we ran into the first thing. A lot of them run proprietary operating systems, so we counted all of those out. And now the reason that the various XDAs are still up on there is because there's a fairly large project in the works to get Linux running on the XDA platforms. They've had a fair bit of success so far. They can boot the phone, and they can even make a GPRS call on the phone. That's pretty much it. I don't know how long they can even keep the GPRS connection up for, though.
I think the XDA is pretty good.
The XDA is working pretty well? Yeah, so they're pretty expensive, so that's why we never got one of them. But they're neat phones, and you can run Linux on them, sort of. So yeah, we eliminated those because they're too expensive. We left the green phone on here, even though it was slightly over our too expensive mark, because it was really cool. But then it wasn't available. They had a GPL problem with their bootloader, so yeah, and then we'll get into the whole GPL problem with this thing. But yeah, so we were left with the Para Wireless Hippie, it's called the Hippie, and the Motorola A1200, and we had this Zeltis Wi-Fi phone on here, which we didn't bring with us, but yeah, and this one, we didn't initially think it runs Linux, but there's questions now. So, and then the Zeltis, you can't get the source code. So, and then with the Motorola phones, both with the A1200 and the earlier A780, which you can sometimes find it, but it's been discontinued, so it's a little harder to find. There's this interesting problem that I mentioned earlier with having the two processors, and there's a watchdog, and it uses SE Linux and just shuts down the phone. So do we? Oh.
Actually, are any of the OpenEZX people here? No, Stefan Smith? No? Okay, I guess not. Okay, they've been working really hard in the last month to get their own Linux kernel running on both the A780 and the A1200. The A780 has the problem where the proprietary CPU shuts down the entire phone if it doesn't get a proper signal from the open source CPU. And of course, they're still hacking and seeing what signals to exactly send, because they're proprietary binaries. So they needed to find out the proper kernel drivers and the MUX clients to talk over that serial line and send the right signals. Last I heard, but I sort of lost contact with them a week and a half ago since I started traveling, was that they managed to have the phone no longer shut down after 30 seconds. So hopefully they're getting better. The problem is, though, with the A780 is that for practical purposes it's not really available anymore. It's like a discontinued phone, so you have to find really sleazy dealers, or I guess eBay, to find it. The problem with the Motorola A1200 is that it's running SE Linux, so it's using the SE Linux mechanisms to basically keep you locked out of your own phone. Apparently the SE Linux version of it is like a year and a half old. So there's, or even older. So there are ways of probably hacking through the SE Linux, but we'll see that there's a move to somewhat more open source phones. So whether these phones are still going to be used in half a year, probably very unlikely, at least not on a massive scale. So the XDAs, they do run Linux. They're very expensive. Not all the device drivers have been supported on them. But of course, the cool thing is the newest XDAs do have like a Wi-Fi and a GSM on them. So if you got the money, it's going to be nice. But we really want like, you know, a $150 phone that everybody can use, and not like a $600 XDA.
With the XDAs, you've also got the fairly significant chance of bricking your phone. They are Windows Mobile phones originally. They also, yeah, I don't think they've made very much progress with getting the Wi-Fi working under Linux. It's the GPRS connection, and they haven't got any voice calls done on them at all. They're having trouble getting access to the microphone. So they've had luck with GPRS and not the Wi-Fi or voice.
So these are the phones we started working on. The Zultus more or less because we had one anyway. I've actually forgot the Zultus, so I can't show it to you, but I'll tell you a bit about it. It's pretty big, and you know, when I heard that Linksys was going to come with the what they call iPhones, which are basically also Wi-Fi only phones, I think they might be much more interesting. Though I'm not sure if they run like VxWorks or Linux. Was that the 15-minute warning or the 5-minute warning? What? 25? As in 5 or 15? 5. Okay, let me race through the slides then. Okay, so let's skip that. So this is briefly the Zultus firmware format that we found. Basically, there's a string, there's a rootfs, there's a gzipped kernel, there's some checksums. We found the string Monta Vista Linux in there, so it's a Monta Vista 2.4.21 kernel. If Harold Welt is around here, I would love to hear why they haven't been sued yet by GPL violations, because basically almost all the GPL violations of Linux kernels seem to be coming from Monta Vista. I guess he won't answer publicly, but maybe privately. Please find me and tell me why this is. So we found the rootfs, the firmware versions in there. It's got BusyBox, glibc, which funnily enough is not used because all the apps are statically linked. It's got the entire phone application in a binary called WIP2, and I got a mini GUI called MP4 Web. And there's what looks like a sound driver in there. So we know pretty much about this firmware. We tried modifying it and then having the phone updated. The phone's still rejecting it. So we're doing something wrong somewhere. There's not many bytes left unaccounted for, so hopefully we'll figure it out. And Willem, who's also worked on the cryptophone, has been a great help analyzing all this firmware. So thank you, Willem. So for flashing, you need to have, yeah, let's just skip this. If you want to flash it, read this. There's some weird things with the phone. Same with the Parawireless. It seems to be running something called HOpen, which is some sort of Chinese telco nationwide new real-time operating system, which seems to be Linux cut with a few functions. It also runs one big binary called W, which seems to be the entire phone application. It's using Linux file systems and C shells and other things. They don't call it Linux, and the vendor is calling this a proprietary Linux OS, and for $200,000 US I could get a license for it to develop for it. Hopefully we can change their mind. So there's 7 executables we found: the shell, GDB server, MK-DOSFS for formatting your external card, and the Xmodem upload download protocol, probably for flashing. So what are we adding to the phones? Well, read through the slides. We found a command line zip client that is really useful. It's called PGSUA. Supporting everything we want. It's got a very small footprint, and we've got some calls working with it. So hopefully we'll be able to put that on the phones. Jabber, there's some Jabber command line clients that we want to add to basically replace SMS. And some scripting that needs to be done once we get there. And wow, this is slide 42. Well, this is basically the end. So if there's any questions, please ask them right now.